When we think of the Colosseum, we imagine gladiators locked in combat, two warriors, face to face, fighting for glory. But what if I told you that was only the surface? That behind the sand and steel lay spectacles so grotesque, so unimaginable, that even seasoned gladiators trembled at the thought of them. These were not contests of skill. They were not games of honor. They were orchestrated massacres where blood was the price of entertainment. And human life was nothing more than a prop. And among them, none was more shocking than the Roman obsession with staging naval battles, not on the sea, but inside the arenas themselves. 1. Naumachiae, naval battles, drenched in blood. Imagine walking into an arena expecting to see swords clash and, instead, finding an entire lake. Not a painted backdrop, not a theatrical trick, but a vast basin filled with water, where real ships awaited. The crowd roared as oars sliced the waves, sails unfurled, and the sound of creaking wood filled the air. This was the naumachiae, Rome's most extravagant and most brutal entertainment. The first great spectacle was staged by Julius Caesar, who ordered a massive artificial lake to be dug in the city. Thousands of prisoners of war were forced to take up oars and weapons, condemned to reenact famous sea battles for the amusement of the masses. They fought not for survival, because survival was never the goal. To die in a way that satisfied the crowd as hunger. But it was under Emperor Claudius that the naumachiae reached its bloodiest climax. In the year 52 CE, he ordered a colossal naval battle on Lake Fucinus. Over 19,000 prisoners, 19,000 souls were thrown into combat. They manned real ships, wielded real weapons, and the clash that followed was not a show, but a massacre. The water turned red with blood. Bodies floated lifeless among broken timbers, and the screams of the condemned echoed across the shore. To heighten the horror, some accounts suggest that Claudius had sharks released into the lake, ensuring that those who tried to escape by swimming met a death even more terrifying than drowning. Think about that for a moment. A ruler so desperate to awe his people that he transformed slaughter into theater, turning an entire body of water into a grave. The naumachiae was never about honoring Rome's naval traditions. It was a demonstration of power, a message from the emperor. I command life and death. I can summon oceans in the heart of Rome and drown men at will. For the audience, it was spectacle. For the condemned, it was hell. And for history, it remains one of the clearest windows into Rome's obsession with violence, not just as punishment, but as entertainment. 2. The perverse hunts the roar of a lion, the crack of a whip, the crowd rising to its feet as a gladiator stepped into the arena to face a beast of prey. This was the venatio, the Roman hunt. At first, it was simple. Man against animal, courage against claws and fangs. It was savage, but it was also, in its own way, a test of bravery. But Rome had a gift for excess, and soon the venatio was twisted into something darker, something grotesque. Under the reign of Domitian, the spectacle lost its honor. He introduced fights not between gladiators and beasts, but between those who should never have been there at all. Dwarfs forced to fight women. Women thrown into the sand, sent against wild animals while still pregnant. These were not contests of courage. They were cruel experiments in humiliation, staged for laughter and shock. Other emperors went even further. Caligula and Nero, infamous for their cruelty, transformed the hunts into nightmares. Prisoners were dressed in animal skins, paraded as if they were the very beasts the crowd despised. And then released dogs tore them apart while the audience laughed. But perhaps nothing was more disturbing than Nero's twisted idea of illumination. In the gardens of his palace, he refused torches. Instead, he soaked prisoners in oil, bound them to poles, and set them aflame. Burning human beings became lanterns to light the night, their screams mixing with music and laughter as Nero strolled through his festivities. Stop for a moment. Think of the silence before the flames were lit. Think of the eyes of those who watched as friends, brothers, or strangers became fire before them. Rome had turned the human body into both a weapon and a candle. For the Roman people, this was spectacle. For the emperors, it was domination, the power to twist not only life, but also dignity into fuel for entertainment. And for the victims, it was the obliteration of humanity itself. The Venetians' perverses revealed the darkest truth of the empire. Rome was not satisfied with conquering lands and peoples. It sought to conquer even the boundaries of morality, to prove that no limit, no sacred value, no shred of compassion could stand against the hunger of the crowd and the will of the emperor. What began as man versus beast became something far worse. Man stripped of his humanity, reduced to mockery, torture, and flames. 3. The rigged games. When we picture gladiators, we imagine warriors, men who trained, bled, and fought with honor. Heroes of the sand, locked in duels that tested strength, skill, and fate. But not every gladiator entered the arena on equal terms. Some were never meant to win. Their battles were rigged from the very beginning, not for sport, not for cruelty. Under Emperor Vespasian, the games began to feature what the Romans called impossible matches. These were spectacles designed not to showcase bravery, but to provoke laughter and mockery. Imagine a blind man handed a weapon, pushed into the arena to fight 12 armed children. It was not a contest, it was a public humiliation. a grotesque parody of battle. The crowd roared, not out of awe, but out of ridicule. And then came Commodus perhaps the most notorious of all Roman emperors, to step into the arena himself. Obsessed with his image as a gladiator, Commodus did not simply fight. He rewrote the rules of the games. He demanded spectacles that blurred the line between theater and sadism. Some prisoners were mutilated before entering, the sand limbs cut away. Bodies crippled it. They were forced to stumble into the arena, armed with little more than broken pride, to face trained fighters or wild beasts. Their deaths were not just certain. They were designed to be pathetic. The emperor wanted to show the crowd not courage, but the absolute futility of resistance. For Commodus, every life in the arena was a stage prop. He himself would appear in gleaming armor, slay helpless victory, and declare victory as if he had conquered Hannibal himself. He shot arrows into tethered animals, decapitated men who could barely stand, and strutted before the crowd as a god of blood. To him, the sand was not a battleground, but a mirror for his vanity. But behind the laughter and cheers lay a darker truth. The games had lost their soul. The gladiator, once a symbol of defiance and courage, had been reduced to a clown of cruelty. The match was no longer about who was stronger, faster, or braver. Was about how far the emperor's imagination could stretch the boundaries of humiliation. Think about the silence after the crowd's laughter faded, when the mutilated bodies were dragged away. Did anyone wonder if Rome had gone too far? Or had the thirst for spectacle drowned out even that thought? The rigged games tell us something haunting about power. When it becomes absolute, it no longer needs to be tested. It only needs to be displayed. And in Rome, that display came at the cost of human dignity, turned into a punchline written in blood. For theatrical executions in Rome, even death could be staged. The Colosseum was not just an arena of combat. It was a theater of cruelty, where the line between myth and reality dissolved in blood. When criminals and prisoners were condemned, they were not simply executed. Their deaths were turned into performances, reenactments of legendary tales. For the crowd, it was a show. For the condemned, it was a sentence written in fire and steel. One man was forced to play Orpheus, the mythical musician who charmed wild beasts with his lyre. The scene began almost poetically, music drifting through the air, the animals circling, subdued by the melody. But then the illusion shattered. The beasts pounced. The man was torn apart before tens of thousands, his screams drowning the song. Another was cast as Hercules, the great hero who endured impossible labors. In this Roman performance, he was not crowned with glory. Instead, he was burned alive, his body consumed by flames, as the audience cheered the spectacle of his suffering. Perhaps the most horrifying was the punishment reserved for those who played Prometheus. Bound to a rock in the center of the arena, their arms stretched wide, they awaited their torment. And then, as if mythology itself had come to life, real eagles descended not to symbolize eternal punishment, but to enact it, tearing into living flesh, feasting on the condemned as the crowd reveled in the horror. To the Romans, these executions were more than cruelty. They were messages. Every staged myth was a reminder that the gods and, by extension, the emperor held absolute power over life and death. The condemned were not just criminals, they were symbols, sacrificed to demonstrate that resistance, disobedience, even existence outside Rome's will would end in agony. Think of the silence in those final moments before the act began. The condemned, dressed in costume, standing beneath the eyes of thousands, knowing that they were about to become the myth but with no chance of survival. Did they pray? Did they curse? Did they look into the crowd, hoping for one merciful soul? Or did they realize that mercy had no place here? The theatrical executions remind us of something chilling. Rome did not just demand victory, it demanded narrative. It turned men into characters, suffering into stories, and death into a script. Every scream was an act, every death a scene. The Colosseum was not a court of justice, it was a stage. And the price of admission was human life. And when the curtain fell, when the bodies were carried away, the audience left entertained, satisfied, hungry for the next show. Rome's arenas remind us of a chilling truth, that even the greatest civilizations can lose themselves in the hunger for spectacle, turning cruelty into entertainment and human life into nothing more than a story told in blood. But history does not disappear, waits for us to uncover it, to question it, to learn from it. And here, together, we can bring those forgotten truths back to light. If this story left you thinking, shocked, or intrigued, don't let it end here. Hit that like button, share this video with those who love history as much as you do, and subscribe to Empire Unveiled Legends. Because the myths hide truths, and the truths of history are often more incredible than legend. Asterisk.